I still am like blown away by the images that we got on the radar of this thing drifting along. It's drifting along. It was at 28 knots, and then it accelerated and turned away, and went an incredible rate of speed to the northwest.
Welcome to the Safe Aerospace Podcast. My name is Ryan Graves, and happy to be back. This is a podcast where we're going to be exploring what pilots and others have been seeing in the sky and what the ramifications of that are. Today, I'm joined by Jason Judy, a 26 years air traffic controller turned corporate pilot who has not only seen things himself, but has been hearing the scuttlebutt across the ready rooms in the commercial and the air traffic control world for several decades now. And I think it's be pretty interesting to dig into that. So why don't we kind of start at the beginning? Air traffic control, when did you join? Where'd you start off?
I joined in I got hired in 1997, started in 96. First duty station was Fort Worth Center, which was, was a pretty big bite to take because that's a lot of busy airspace, but
yeah,
it was really cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Spent 7 years there.
You spent 7 years in Fort Worth. Awesome. And it's a pretty hard career for what I understand. Air traffic control, very stressful. A lot of hours. My neighbors, when I was living back in the New England area, were actually air traffic controllers in Boston. One for ATC and another actually in the tower itself in Boston. It certainly could be a stressful job. Jumping into a corporate aviation career after that, how'd that come about?
So I started flying when I was 15.
Mm-hmm.
I thought I was going to be a military pilot like yourself.
Okay.
And tore my ACL when I was 19 and couldn't get a waiver.
Mm-hmm.
So I marched around ROTC for a year, and that didn't work out for me. They wouldn't give me a waiver, even though our commander thought he was going to be able to give me one.
Yeah.
So anyway, after a year of that, I was like, boy, what now? I started flying, like I said, when I was 15. So I transferred from the University of Utah to Salt Lake Community College because they had an aviation program, and was doing my flying on my own. And then in the process, I took a tour of Salt Lake Center, and I was like, wow, this is really cool. I've never heard of anybody becoming a controller. I'd only met one once in my life prior to that point, and asked him I said, how does somebody get a job doing this? And anyway, they invited me back because I was with a tour group, and they were like, if you really think it's something you'd want to do, why don't you come back next week and we'll plug you into a sector and see how things go. And so I came back, plugged in, applied. It took the FAA was having a hiring freeze back then.
Yeah.
Oddly enough, right? Now we're short controllers
yeah.
for the last many years. But anyway, they had a hiring freeze. So 2 years later, I got a letter, said, hey, if you want to be an air traffic controller, you got to do an aptitude test. You got to, upgrade your medical from a third to a second class and all this other stuff. And I did all that, not thinking I was going to get in because, there was kind of a backlog. And the school that I went through in Minnesota only was taking 32 students. Anyway, they got back to me and said, hey, you're in. And I was like, oh boy, is this something I even want to do? Mm-hmm. So I kind of went into it, just dipping my toe because I loved flying. I loved aviation, and I was not entirely sure if I would like it as a career, but it looked super interesting. It looked pretty intense. So anyway, went to school, got out, went to Fort Worth Center, and loved the job. I mean, after a couple of years, all my high school buddies that were, still driving their high school car, that were wanting to be pilots, right? They're still driving their high school car. There wasn't very many pilot jobs back then. Yeah. So by the time I got certified, I was making good money, had a good life. I bought a share of an airplane, and I was like, I'm just going to do this for a living, finish off my career here. So
very cool.
Kind of stuck into that.
And then I guess ultimately went back to what caused the motivation to join that as well, by getting back into flying after that.
Yeah. Well, so, a couple of years ago, it's been about 2.5 years. I retired in 23. The pilot market was going gangbusters, and all my buddies that I was making fun of when we were 30 years old and they're driving their high school car, they were like, hey, why don't you were eligible to retire, right? And I was like, yeah, I just became eligible. Why don't you jump out and fly? And I said, because nobody's going to hire a 50-year-old. And they were like, no, right now they will. And I was like, seriously? Because I'd known a guy years back that, had a ton of money. He was super ultra wealthy guy. He went and bought a couple of airplanes to get all of his time because he just wanted another job. He was kind of a trust fund type guy. Anyway, they wouldn't hire him because he's 40 years old and he was too old.
Yeah.
So
well, yeah, I mean that is pretty interesting that people are getting hired. So I mean, I know a lot of people, they think that if they missed out on a flying career in their 20s, they're done. But it goes to show that there's no time limit. And it kind of makes sense. The airlines get this body that they get to use for 15 years without getting to the top of the pay scale. So it's probably a better deal for them as well.
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah. Well, cool. So I guess jumping back to the ATC career, when did I guess what year were you in ATC? When did you start?
I started in 97.
97. So 97, we were definitely calling them UFOs back then.
Yeah.
When did this conversation come into your awareness? And were you interested in this prior to whatever event caused you to professionally run into this?
Yeah. So I mean, when I was a little kid, we had a couple of. I heard one of them was a returning or a falling Soviet, I don't know, booster rocket or something like that flew across our sky when we walked outside with grandma to send her off, and this fireball goes ripping across the sky all the way down, and it looked low. You could literally hear it burning up as it was coming through. Yeah, it was like, whoosh. And so that was like my first real like starting to look up, right? Yeah, the first thing that I was like, man, there's some crazy stuff going on up there, and like I said, we looked into it and found out, my parents said it was a booster rocket or something that had tumbled back to Earth, or a satellite. I don't remember what it was. I was pretty young, but it kind of got me looking up a little bit more.
It's fascinating. You're in good company, right? I mean, people have been looking up at the sky forever and seeing things that didn't make sense and reporting them and being told that that's silly and nonsense. And one of the, I think, greatest examples of that is meteorites, right?
Yeah.
I mean, medieval times, people would report these falling rocks from the sky, which everyone said was completely ridiculous on its face to think that the earth was falling from the heavens like that. And it took, I don't know how long, but perhaps decades for them to really accept that as a reality with enough accumulated evidence that, they didn't have sensors, of course, for, right? It was just accumulated human intelligence. And, it's reminiscent of the conversation we're having. Of course, that ended up being a prosaic one, but even a booster falling out of the sky as a child, kind of, I can imagine igniting curiosity for what else you might see.
Oh, yeah. Well, it very well could have been a meteor. I have no idea. It was a long time ago.
Yeah.
I seem to recall that, but yeah. And then we were on a scout camp and saw another one, and kind of the same thing. It lit up the sky. It was there for a long time. Went all the way across the sky, and kind of piqued my curiosity about what's going on up there a little bit more. But really didn't. I mean, I still, to be honest, was not like a real intense, ufologist or whatever you want to call it. I just, I always found it interesting. I always was curious about what's going on, but never thought that much about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I was the same way. Well, when did you butt into it, your professional career?
So the first, there's actually, it was kind of amazing being an air traffic controller, all the crazy things that happen, right? One of the first ones that I remember was, it was West Texas, and I wasn't working the sector, but, I heard the guys talking about it immediately after it happened. But one of the pilots said, man, we almost got hit by a Volkswagen. And, and we're like, a Volkswagen? Like, I wonder what was falling out of the sky, right? So, of course, the supervisors and everybody else looks into it, and it turned out that one of the NASA, I think it was NASA, I don't know, it was some test balloon had dropped its payload. And I don't know if it was planned. I don't know if it was, it's going to go to a certain height, it's going to rip and fall to the earth, but it almost hit an aircraft, and those guys were freaked out about it. Mm-hmm. And so, that was kind of piqued my curiosity again. I'm like, whoa, what's going on there? Mm-hmm. And then I think it was around 2003 when the space shuttle was coming back to Earth, and it, fell apart over Texas. And once again, I was a little bit late getting in the control room because I was heading into work when when it passed over. But as soon as I got into work, everybody was talking about, man, there was stuff falling all over the place, and all these pilots were reporting debris and things that they were, that were freaking them out, that they were worried about.
I think not too long ago, there was an air traffic that came relatively close and visually spotted some debris from a SpaceX launch. So, it's an interesting risk that we're probably going to see more and more of, right?
Yeah.
I mean, airspace is getting busier from electric vertical takeoff and landing vehicles, eVTOLs, to low Earth orbit satellites, and all the traffic that goes in between. What else have you seen, kind of heard that was weird out there, but maybe explainable?
No. So explainable stuff. There's been numerous balloons, weather balloons, right, that people report, and we start looking into it and find out, they launched a weather balloon at whatever time, and it's probably about 40,000 by now. So we got a lot of those.
Let's stop there for a second.
Yeah.
How often in your career were you getting those types of maybe not near misses, but spottings of non-tracked devices like balloons that might be used for testing or other purposes? How often does that happen?
Quite a bit. It seemed like it picked up in more recent years, and I'm sure we'll get to that in a bit. But back then, you'd hear some crazy report of something. Probably, I don't know, in the center, at Fort Worth Center, probably a couple times a month.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, it's a lot from a safety perspective. It's, not a lot compared to the overall number of flights, I would imagine. But, the pilots don't have an unlimited eyesight out there, right? They're only going to be able to see 10 to 15 foot object, maybe call it from 10 miles away, depending, right, on the conditions, if they're lucky. And so, a average size weather balloon, I don't know the numbers, but it's definitely something that can be missed, especially in a commercial cockpit where your view is relatively limited.
Right.
And you spent more time in a commercial aircraft than I have, but you're really not seeing anything unless it's off your nose and in that zone, right?
Well, you know how it goes. I mean, focal lengths and all that. If you're looking up into a blue sky with no depth perception,
you're looking right at it.
I remember when I was a supervisor at Salt Lake, and I'm probably jumping ahead quite a few years here, but my controller's always complaining, with arrivals into Sun Valley, that the planes can't see each other. They're like, they're 2 miles apart, and it's a big jet. Why can't they see each other? Yeah. It's difficult up there to see much of anything.
Some of the scariest times as a pilot flying the F-18 was exactly those scenarios where I'm, flying maybe a mile away from someone. I'm supposed to be flying in formation with them, and you look away at your instruments for a moment, you come back and just boom, they're gone, right?
Yeah.
And you just start scanning the sky where they could be.
Yeah.
And hopefully you pick them up before you
Yeah.
have some type of midair. But it absolutely could be very, very difficult out there, and that's why we rely on our sensors so much, and why we trust them so much. But commercial airlines, unfortunately, don't have those same capabilities. Before we jump into kind of maybe the stranger ones you've seen, let's talk about some of those capabilities that air traffic control has. And just to be clear for those that maybe are in aviation, right? So as a pilot, when I'm flying around at altitude around the United States, I'm almost 100% of the time speaking with a watch guard group, if you will, air traffic control, who is vectoring his way from traffic and managing weather and timing and all these considerations. And then, of course, as we get lower in altitude and approach an airport, approach control comes on and helps guide us all the way down to a safe landing. Anything I said incorrectly there?
No, that sounds pretty good.
So, this is the group where if there are issues in the air, air traffic control should be maybe the second person to know about it, right?
Yeah.
Other than the co-pilot.
Yeah.
So that they can safely maneuver other air traffic that's coming behind you with that same issue. And what tools is air traffic control using out there? And I think most people assume that air traffic control has perfect radar situational awareness across the entire continental United States. What's a tool set look like?
So basically right now we're looking at 3 different types of radar. You've got one is your primary radar. It's just raw radar returns. Radar spins 5 times in a minute. It reflects off of paint or birds or clouds or whatever, and it comes back to the radar site and paints that on your radar scope. The other two are secondary radar, which is, you're basically your transmitter sending out a signal, and the transponder in the aircraft is sending back a signal, replying who they are, where they're at. It gives a solid speed and all that other identification information.
Well, we would call it a cooperative track, right? They're working with you to identify.
The only thing that radar is sending back is replies from the avionics on the aircraft. So, that's where we get all of our information off of that. The new one that they just came out with, it's been a few years, but is ADS-B.
Yeah.
And ADS-B is nice because you've got satellite and ground sensors. It's updating instead of once every 11 seconds. In certain areas, it can update every second or so. It's just like a continuous track, which is really nice.
And again, that's a cooperative system, right? Both the aircraft as well as the ground station have to have the proper equipment and be working together, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and there's still a lot of small aircraft that don't have ADS-B out there. They have to stay away from the larger airports and stuff. But yeah, there's a ton of planes that still don't have that third piece that we have right now.
So when we think about how air traffic control might interact or detect UAP, is it fair to say that the majority of what you assume from your professional experience, at least, comes from reporting from pilots or from equipment that air traffic control has?
So I wish it was from equipment that air traffic control has, because we can see a lot more. But so a couple of issues you run into. One, the raw radar, right? That primary radar that shoots out, reflects off paint, and comes back. We filter that out above 23,000. So we're not even looking at those primary returns once you get above 23,000 feet. The low altitude controller sees it. Now, the raw radar, and I've actually ran into a guy from Tech Ops at Salt Lake Center on the flight down here.
Okay.
But I wish that he could have been in here because he could have told us a little bit more. But if we took all of the returns that it gets, that your raw radar gets, it'd clutter your entire radar scope. So they filter that stuff out. I mean, I remember working a sector that's west of Salt Lake and being able to see every car on the highway. You could tag them up, you could track their speed. It's that capable and it goes that low. But we don't want to be watching cars on the highway, so we have them filter out that until we get down to few enough targets that it actually makes sense to be looking at them.
Is that something you can control, or is that from a software level?
So controller on the sector, they have ranges that you can filter out, but it's kind of an on or off switch for us. For the controller on the sector, it's like, turn it on, turn it off.
Yeah. And the raw data is coming in, it's just getting filtered. So presumably there is a archive of raw data that would be suitable for analysis around points of interest, right? So if there's a case 3 years ago over an airport, presumably that data is somewhere, the raw data for analysis. Is that fair to say? I'm not trying to walk you into that either.
No, you're totally fine.
Curious.
The thing is they only keep that data for 45 days and it gets washed.
Yeah.
They've got the hard drives and they recycle, and 45 days goes by. So you pilots out there, 45 days goes by, you're good.
I wonder what the opportunity space is there, right? I mean, if they're just throwing the data away, right, with minimal analysis, one might presume that there's some value that is obtained that data that can be mined, right, by a company or an organization that has special permission to perhaps preserve that data past the 45 days. There might be some privacy or other concerns that might limit that, but that would be an interesting model to explore, especially if you had targeted data around where events occurred. You don't have to ask for everything. You can ask for just that slice, perhaps, and run your analysis. So cool project out there if anyone wants to get on that. In fact, it would be a good project for the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics, the UAP Integration Outreach Committee, which I chair. That could be something that we could look into and get some people involved. All right, let's get into it. So let's kind of talk about the UAP UFO experiences that you had as an air traffic controller. And I know there's one case that you at least publicly declared in, by the way, the fantastic article that you wrote about a week ago. What was the date that it was released? Do you recall?
Well, I don't even know the date. It was Flying Magazine around the Boy, my days all blend into
About a
one
week or
each
two, and we'll post a date. We'll post a link to the article when we publish this,
Yeah.
so people can give it a read. But you essentially kind of came out with your knowledge of this space a little bit, and so
Yeah.
thanks for doing that, and being one of those pilots that are willing to step up and at least acknowledge this issue.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd love to hear a little bit about them. And again, we can save the classified story perhaps. I'm not going to put you too much on the story that you mentioned was related to, it was classified, but related to UAP.
Yeah.
I'm not going to ask you or even try to get you to divulge anything you shouldn't. But I do wonder if there's a little bit more you could add to that if possible. But yeah, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah. So, couple of things that I want to mention first. We have had, because I think we got off track, but because every time we start talking about UAP in break rooms, pilot lounges, whatever, a lot of people are like, oh, that's just satellites, right?
Mm-hmm.
We had Starlink. When I was a supervisor, we had Starlink up on one of our tabs, so that if Starlink flew over and everybody started freaking out, because especially when that first string started going, like everybody was losing their mind over that one, and so we had it up on our scope so that we could say, oh, that's Starlink. Everybody calm down. It's Starlink, right?
Good.
And then the other one was the Google balloons that were flying around for a long time. Those ones we also had a tab up on our scope so that if people reported an object, we could take a look and be like, yeah, that correlates to where this Google balloon is.
We had one of those bust up one of our training missions out in Fallon once. It broke loose of its tether.
Yeah, really?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, so those ones were reported a lot. But as far as the stuff that we couldn't explain, right? The first one that really caught my interest was, it was probably 1998. I was the new controller. One of the controllers, one of the CPCs, actually back then it was FPL, full performance level controller, had gone and pulled the data and sent it off to Art Bell on some. There were 3 lights over Dallas.
Mm-hmm.
The pilots that saw it were like, oh, that looks like a refueling formation. But we pulled up primary radar, didn't get anything on the primary radar. We asked a couple other pilots in the area to corroborate, and they did. They were like, yeah, I see the lights. But, back then everybody was like, I didn't see nothing, right? Nobody wanted to talk about any of it. So anyway, he ended up going on our Bell show and talking about that. So that one was interesting, but the real time that we got into the UAP really heavy was back in around 21 to 23-ish. We had UAP reports almost every night. Like, it was amazing how many on the midships. So much so, this one kind of cracks me up, because one of the videos that I was watching, because I had to write a report on it or whatever, but I'm watching the playback, and the controller calls up the operations manager at the watch desk, and he goes, hey, they're back. And he goes, all right, I'll be right down. And that's all they talked about. He knew who they were.
Yeah.
Because it was happening so often.
That's funny. I've said almost the same thing back off the coast, Virginia. When we first visually saw him, he's like, I almost hit one of those damn things. And, we all knew what he was talking about, even though we didn't really have a name for it because it was happening so much. Wow. Yeah. You said that was 2021?
Yeah, like 21, 20. Yeah, those last couple of years, 20. Yeah, about 21 is when they started hitting really heavy. And we were getting them at all different altitudes. I mean, we had one, for some reason the call sign stuck in my head, but American 1273 was reporting an object off its left wing that was, bouncing up and down, and it tracked him all the way to almost Salt Lake.
Yep. That's very common.
Yeah.
A lot of reports from pilots who have these things off their wings in close proximity, going up and down next to a single wing, repositioning on the other side of the aircraft, and in some of these cases, basically as the aircraft starts its descent, this thing will just rise and take off until it can't be seen, or in some cases descend to right above the water. And in one case, this was happening at night. You can even see this. There was 3 objects actually that were maneuvering. Each one was a different color. They were illuminated, and at the end of his flight, these things descended all the way down to the ocean. They just illuminated the ocean before they were out of sight.
Wow.
So pretty common. Wow. Yeah. Please continue.
Yeah. So that was one of them, but we had them. We had them all the time. One one of my buddies, I heard audio of his that I'd recorded not too long ago, and I was looking through it, and he's like, all right, he's calling the sector next to him, and he goes, all right, these guys right here are reporting a UFO 12 o'clock, and they think it's around 40 miles, and there's two of them, they're maneuvering, and some of the stuff that they do, they'd get into lines and then go into triangle and then split off in different directions.
Yep.
Just, crazy maneuvering.
Stuff you wouldn't expect from a normal aircraft.
Yeah.
Or satellites, right?
Right.
Often some of the reports we have to parse out, is this some kind of Starlink? Is this not?
Right.
And there's some things that you can use to tell. Do they maneuver while fully illuminated?
Yeah.
Do they appear to maneuver because they flash out, another one flashes in type thing? But I mean, some of these, like you just described, there's too much going on for it to, be anything other than some type of craft or object maneuvering in the way that seems apparent.
Yeah. Yeah, one that was flying vertical figure eights, just zoom for a long, long time. Just,
Yeah, I've heard those patterns as well. Wow, really interesting. And these were a lot of kind of the bulk of reports that we were getting in that time period as well, with similar patterns. So it's interesting to hear that what we were receiving was representative of kind of this larger data set.
Yeah.
What other behaviors? Anything else?
Boy, you name it. Like it was. We got so many different reports over the years that so kind of the funny part for me, right? I wrote that article just as, kind of everybody in the aviation community seems kind of knows about the objects, right? That something's going on out there, whether it's, everybody's guess is different. Some people are like, oh, it's just our own military with super secret stuff. Other people are, oh, it's definitely off-planet intelligence, is whatever, right? But everybody agrees that there's something out there that we're not in control of, that the military is probably not in control of because it's messing with those guys too, that is interfering with air traffic.
Yep.
Or at least, coexisting with air traffic. I'm hoping that they're advanced enough that they're missing all of our stuff, because that's always been one of the biggest concerns for us as controllers. Something's in my airspace. It poses a hazard, a risk to the other aircraft in my airspace. How do I do my job? How do I create a situation where it's safe for my aircraft to transition through that airspace?
Especially if you know that as you communicate that to maybe the next aircraft in line, it's going to be received as a joke at first, right? You're going to have to get over whatever that hump is, right, with that individual pilot to make them be like, okay, actually I have to watch out for whatever this object was. So what's kind of your general perspective on that kind of that self-filtering, if you will, that self-censoring that pilots are doing? I know I've talked about it before with the stigma and whatnot, but be interested to kind of just get your fresh take, what you think.
I think it forever was stigma, and then it's like, do I know too much? I don't know what the hang up is. And that was, in my article, that was kind of one of the, I'm like, guys, we can talk about this stuff. Everybody knows it's out there, at least in the pilot community. I was actually kind of surprised it got as many reads and traction as it did, because like I said, you walk into an air traffic control room and you're like, hey, saw UAP today, and everybody's like, whatever, or
don't blow up my worldview today, sir. I have bills to pay.
Yeah. Oh, I got another report. Okay, yeah, we had one last night too. Everybody just knew that they were out there. Just knew that it was somewhat of a safety issue.
So, you talked about how things picked up in 2020, 2021, and that you are filing reports. Was there a change in process or procedure or awareness that you think led to maybe the uptick, or this new reporting procedure, maybe led to more awareness and more reports coming in? Do you sense this shift, or did you just kind of feel things pick up and there was always a reporting system perhaps, but it wasn't well acknowledged or used? Yeah,
I remember filling out UFO reports, I don't even know what the entity was or whatever, but if we had one reported to us or whatever, either the supervisor or us would go on and fill it out to the UFO reporting database, whatever that was back in the day.
This is pre-2020?
Oh, yeah. This was like, early 2000s. There was still some avenue outside of the FAA that we were even reporting to. But yeah, I don't know where any of that data ever went. I never saw any. We never got any briefings on that stuff.
So I think I do know where that went. I believe for a period of time in the mid, 2000s, or maybe a little bit later even, Bigelow Aerospace was running a program for the government under funding that Senator Harry Reid helped establish. And that program, I believe, for a period of time was even written into the federal aviation regulations that was an organization that should be reported to. So for a period of time, I think it was several 100,000 reports from the aviation community during the period of time that they were in there. But to your point, that was all classified. All the analysis was classified, and as far as I know, is still sitting in the archives of Bigelow Aerospace, unused for the rest of the aviation community, right? That's their safety data.
Right.
It was paid for by the government in order to understand this, and none of the learnings from that come back out on the aviation safety side.
Yeah.
So,
see, that's kind of the problem for all of it, right? Like I said, we never got briefed on UAPs. We never, like, anything except for the one, the one classified incident, but that wasn't even that big of a deal, like, especially compared to all the other ones that we had. And I was just always shocked that we never, never got that briefing, never naturalized it, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, but if we would have acknowledged it and just said, okay, if you get reports, this is how we handle them, but never got that.
Yep.
Never got that. They never said, don't report it to other people, never said, don't talk about it. It was just, it's like, oh, yeah,
Just completely
interesting.
ignored. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, that's too bad. Well, there's, I hope help on the way. I've helped advise on some legislation that would require NASA, in conjunction with the FAA, to modify the aviation safety reporting system to be able to accept these reports, and then funnel it to organizations either in DoD or elsewhere that can assess whether some of these might pose a national security concern. But primarily by going through ASRS, that's now going to create this public repository of these reports so that people can use that data to provide updates to pilots, at unions or at different airlines, and incorporate this data into their flight planning eventually.
Yeah.
We've received a lot of data at Americans for Safe Aerospace, and there are continued reports coming in from air traffic controllers today to the tune of several per day. Now, where these are coming in, and not just ones that are very distant in the sky, but within 1,000 feet. It's about how often it's happening, and most pilots aren't aware of that, and that's what some of the information that we're working to get out at Americans for Safe Aerospace. Very interesting. Any other air traffic controller reports that you want to discuss before we maybe move on to your flying?
Well, the big one that.
Oh yes,
yeah, we can't. We'd be remiss to not talk about that one because that was the most unexplainable one that I, in my career, I think. We started having these, and the media would have you, or the girl. I don't know who it was, putting out the narrative, but somebody was. Implying that we only had one balloon that was slowly drifting across the United States that all the pilots were seeing. But it was many silver objects. And, the one that they shot down off the coast of North Carolina, I think, it was a white, patched together.
Yeah.
I don't know what they threw up there to shoot down, but that didn't look anything like the pictures that, some guys, pilots had taken. Obviously, they didn't have great cameras, but they were zooming in on their cell phones, and they were all describing it as a very shiny silver object, and they were seeing it for miles and miles around.
So this is fascinating. So let's stop for a second. So what we're talking about now, there was kind of two incidences that occurred. There was the Chinese balloon incident kind of kicked everything off, where I think folks in Montana started publicly taking photos of something, and then it was tracked, became a news article. Or, a big news thing, and then eventually it was shot down off the eastern seaboard somewhere. And then I think, was it a couple weeks later, there was a number of other shoot downs, or a week later?
I heard that there was other shoot downs, but I don't. There was another one a few weeks later that was over Montana. I heard there was one in Alaska.
Yeah.
But I don't have a lot of firsthand on those except for the Montana one, because they did tell us, hey, we're gonna, we had to sterilize a piece of airspace because they said they were going to go shoot down, another one that was floating over Montana.
So this is all in the time period where, we saw in the news the Chinese balloon. So you're saying during that time, your net was telling you that, hey, they were seeing not just that object, but many objects that were
Yeah.
spherical, metal spheres essentially,
Right.
over the continental United States.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's definitely a different narrative than I think what most people understood about that.
Yeah. I mean, that's what the pilots were reporting. That's what all the controllers were hearing. And then they're drifting along. That I still am like blown away by the images that we got on the radar of this thing drifting along. It's drifting along. It was at 28 knots, and then it accelerated and turned away, and went an incredible rate of speed to the northwest. I just last night I was like, I'm not smart enough to figure this out, but maybe AI is. And so I punched in. So the way our radar works, right? It gives us, unless you're using ADS-B, it gives you an average of the last 5 radar updates is what speed it shows as the speed of the aircraft on your radar scope, right? So this aircraft, whatever this thing was, when it turned and it was going 28 knots and ended at 672 knots is the last update that we got on it before it disappeared off our radar. And that was, they had actually taken and tracked that target. So they had balloon, written in the data block, and it was tracking this balloon that was drifting along. And the controller was briefing another controller that's taking over, and hey, this here balloon, they think it's around 45,000, but we're not sure if that altitude's accurate at all. Anyway, he starts telling him, he goes, I'm going to get back to that. And he starts telling him about other stuff that's going on. And he goes, oh, wait, that's weird. And he goes, oh, that's really weird. Because the balloon had made a U-turn and it was accelerating. Every hit, it was, went from 28 knots to 98 to, I've got them wrote down back here if you want to grab it.
Yeah, we could probably do some math on that. That'd be pretty interesting to see the acceleration on it.
Fortunately, AI did the math for me. Because like I said, I don't know that I'm smart enough to do that kind of math, but let's see. Now, sorry about this. Sorry about the delay. All right, the first update was 28 knots. Next one was 67, then 97, then 229, then 398, and then 643 knots.
Wow.
And so
exponential acceleration.
Yeah. So I put it into, to AI and said, hey, if this is averaging the last 5 hits, what is the actual speed on our last update? And it said, it was 1,253 knots, I think, and 1,252 knots, and miles per hour. That's 1,441 miles per hour.
So stationary to that speed in about
That was a minute.
a minute.
Yeah.
1 minute.
Yeah,
Wow.
because five radar rotations in a minute.
Yeah, just to be clear, that is faster than F-18. If you think about us taking off on the ground, we can, accelerate pretty quick, but only if we're already halfway there, and pointed down.
Right. Well, I plugged in and said, what if that acceleration had continued at 200? The next 4 hits, so less than a minute. Another, what was that? 47 seconds later, that aircraft. If it continued to accelerate, because we lost it on radar at that point, right? Mm-hmm. So if it continued to accelerate at that rate, in less than a minute, it would have been 2,222 knots, which I'd have to plug it into my my calculator to figure out what that is in miles per hour. But you're talking, you're getting closer to 2,600 miles per hour, I think, something like that.
Incredible.
Yeah.
And so presumably, that's, one of the reasons radars lose track essentially is that it's using a motion model more or less to predict where it needs to look for the next update on the radar. And this thing presumably just kind of blew past where, this thing was designed to look for the next update. Wow.
Yeah. We tracked SR-71s and they were going, Mach 3. But if the next update jumped beyond the range of what an SR-71, then it goes, oh, maybe that's just a bird, or a flock of birds over here flying along. And so we're not gonna keep that tag target on it because it went too far in that hop. Pretty amazing.
So what happened after that event?
Not much.
No? Was there any report?
Controllers talked about it, they reported to the supervisor reports to the chain, but everybody's just like, wow, another weird thing going on.
the negligence always shocks me. Not like personally, but just like as a culture,
Yeah,
right?
no.
Like this culture of wanting to ignore something that is objectively interesting. That's
Yeah.
why we've identified it, is because it's interesting and abnormal, and yet there's this aversion to whatever that is because it disrupts the day to day.
Yeah.
episodes,
Yeah, no, like I said, all the controllers were talking about it, and obviously had some safety concerns because this thing is making a U-turn, accelerating through all of our traffic. Fortunately, that one was supposedly above it, or above most of it.
Were there any other interesting or of note occurrences during that time period?
Not really any similar to that, but like I said, I mean, weekly it all blends together because every week when I was a supervisor, I was filling out UAP reports. Yeah. Literally almost every week. Some weeks you'd go by, and it happened the day before you were working, the day after it was working, but yeah, I mean, like I said, I could probably bring in all the controllers that worked mid shifts with me, and they could all tell you 1,000 of their own stories, but yeah, just all the time.
Well, that'd be great. We're actually, ASA is going to be at Oshkosh this year.
Yeah.
For those not familiar, it's the world's largest aircraft fly-in. I think last year they had about 750,000 people.
Wow.
So we'll be there in full force. And if you're an air traffic controller or pilot or anyone else, I encourage you to look us up on the map and come out and pay us a visit and tell us your stories. We're going to be talking to a lot of people that week. It's going to be exciting. Just fascinating. Even a well-documented situation like what occurred, right? Everyone was watching it, but we kind of just looked at the wrong thing. It's like we zoned off on, the shiny object of the Chinese balloon, but we kind of didn't have the data collection in place or the attention on what was happening around it that pilots were seeing that maybe gives us more information. And that's just what is lacking in this whole conversation. And I've been pushing forward is more reporting on this.
Yeah.
Well, shall we move on to flying?
Sure.
All right. Where would you like to start with that?
Boy, we can either go back. Yeah, let's go back to, it was probably 1998, pretty close. Yeah, I'm thinking 1998 because I was working on my instrument ticket at the same time that I was, starting my air traffic control career. I was working on my D sides and instrument ticket at the same time. It was pretty heavy load, but they also complement each other. So, it was kind of a nice way to do it. But anyway, I got to the end of all of my flying and found a DPE in Arkansas that could see me way sooner than anybody in Dallas could. So me and my instructor, he's one of my best friends from growing up, hopped in the plane and headed to Arkansas to go get my instrument check ride. Anyway, fly up there, got the instrument check ride, passed, fortunately.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Anyway, turn around, we're coming back, and these 5 bright lights pop up. And I kid you not, they're from our 12 to maybe 1:30, and bright as can be. I legit thought it was 5 helicopters with their landing lights on because, I've seen them all my life because South Valley Regional in Salt Lake has a lot of helicopters that, fly around with their landing light on for some reason. So anyway, I saw these guys, and I was like, holy crap, they're coming right at us. And I turned to my buddy and he goes, yeah. And so I immediately key up because, I was already doing their traffic control thing. And I said, hey, Center, do you have any traffic for us? Like 12 to 1:30, there's 5 aircraft and they're heading right at us. And Center goes, stand by. And, I know what he's doing because he's working low altitude sector. So out there, most low altitude sectors are capped at 23,000. So he probably quick looks the sector above him and ranges out and goes, only traffic around you is 40 miles at your 12 o'clock. It's a 727 at flight level 240. And I'm like, this gives you an idea how long ago it was. This is 727. But anyway, I turned to my buddy and I'm like, and I did the
You're the problem.
Right? Yeah. And I look at him and I'm like, what? And we, and he sticks his hands up and we're both like, what the crap? And we look back and the lights just go, all 5 of them, all at the exact same time. It wasn't, and to me, I don't know. I mean, I talked to him the other day. He actually called me, 30 years later and asked me, you remember that? And I was like, yeah.
It wasn't always so forthcoming. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. So him being one of my best friends growing up, right? After this experience, we were both happened to be in Utah at the same time, and got together with a couple of our good high school buddies because we had a really tight group of buds. And I started going, hey, you wouldn't believe what happened to me and Joe. Uh-oh, I just sold him out. So if you know Joe, this is the guy. Anyway, I was like, we were, I tell him the story, right? And I look at him, I'm like, right, Joe? And he goes, I don't know what you're talking about.
Cold.
And I'm like, seriously, man? Like, unbelievable. I said, I work for the government. Like, if this is going to be a problem, it's going to be as much a problem for me as it is for you. And he just was, he just didn't want to talk about it. Now, in his defense, he says now that he was just yanking my chain, if he indeed said that. So, yeah, but I absolutely 100%. He said that he just didn't want to talk about it, and especially in front of our friends. He didn't want them to think we're kooky, right? So, yeah, 30 years later, well, it's almost been 30 years. It's been, gosh, how long has it been? Now, more like 25 years later. He, called me a few months ago, right before I wrote the article, actually. That was part of my inspiration. It's like, you remember that?
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, I remember that. It was one of the craziest things I've ever seen. So, yeah, I have no idea what it was. It faintly reminisces of the Phoenix lights, kind of the same, 5 bright lights, perfectly evenly spaced. And, yeah.
How wide were they, like, if you were to hold your hand out, what size object would have covered the whole formation?
It was my 12 to 1 o'clock, so it was like, like
no, the whole thing was 12 to 1 o'clock.
So,
Okay.
if lead aircraft or,
Yeah.
left in our kind of sense, right in theirs, was here, the other one was like that. And so they were spread out pretty wide. And I have no idea what range. It was at night.
Was there any
bright
relative
light.
motion?
I thought it was, it looked like they were closing on us.
Yeah.
Because, they went from nothing to bright to brighter. And, it just kind of seemed like they were, pressing into us. And
yeah, it's getting on that cusp of like what we call constant bearing, decreasing range.
Yeah.
As a pilot that flew a lot of formation flying,
Yeah.
There's this one kind of nuance where if you're on the right relative path with another aircraft, whether it's moving away from you and you're approaching it, or whether it's coming at you, if you guys are basically aligned in the right way, you can't see any relative change on the aircraft because it's basically moving, the angle that the aircraft would be moving, you're adjusting for that basically at the same rate. So it just looks fixed and stationary on your canopy. And that's basically a collision course if you don't know any better.
Oh, yeah.
So when I see lights that are like fixed like that, and then maybe you're just moving a little bit, I'm on, my first thought is I might be on a collision course with these objects, right? And then they disappear, which would have made me even more nervous, frankly, because it's like, can I just not see them anymore?
Right.
Did they go behind an obstacle that I don't know is there?
Did they turn off their lights and they're still coming?
Exactly, yeah.
Because they were definitely, I mean, they made me nervous enough that I immediately keyed up and asked air traffic. I was like, hey, you got some traffic for us? Because I'm like, come on, guys. They look like they're right at our altitude, and they're taking up a big swath of space.
What was the altitude again?
We were low. We were flying a Cherokee.
Okay.
And, we were probably 6,500, I'm guessing.
I'll admit I'm not the best with helicopters, but that sounds a little bit higher than you expect the formation of helicopters to be flying at.
Yeah. And, most helicopters definitely flying a little bit lower, but when they're doing cross country and stuff, I've seen them.
Yeah.
Sometimes they want to get high enough where they can actually get flight following and relax a little bit because they got our traffic looking out for them too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. I would like to go fly a helicopter if anyone in Austin would like to take me flying. Not too many experiences with that.
Yeah.
But that's very cool. And you had a co-pilot in that aircraft or no?
So that one was, it was my flight instructor.
Your flight instructor was in there.
Coming back with me. So
how was there a debrief about that?
No, we chatted about it. We talked about it the whole way back. It was like, what the crap was that,
Did he have an opinion?
He was just like, I don't know, but he just was very uncomfortable with it. He's like, that was coming right at us. And I was like, yeah,
and then
it certainly was. Yeah. And then all of a sudden it disappeared, which made it even weirder. It'd be one thing if it was all coming right at us and, we divert to the left and they fly by and, off we go. But the fact that they, just, and like I said, it was weird because it wasn't like, just flipping off a light. It was more like, which, I don't know how to describe that better, but it just like dimmed almost like it was going away from us. but it did it really fast.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know,
So maybe it didn't blink off. Maybe they accelerated in the opposite direction. One might not take it off the table, anyways.
Yeah, I wouldn't take that off the table. I don't know either way, but to me, like my memory of it was more like, you know, Star Wars going into light speed, and it's just
yeah,
you know,
and you know that's often reported in cases. Sometimes these things kind of disappear as if they were shot out of a gun and fly away.
Yeah.
Sometimes they appear to just kind of blink out immediately. Sometimes they seem to almost kind of blink out at a point.
Yeah.
And you know, there's some visual tricks that come into play. There is something accelerating rapidly away from you, and it appears to shrink down to a point, or is there some other mechanism we don't know? But it's not always as obvious as these things just kind of repositioning linearly but fast in a way that we can recognize.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Any other flying ones?
Yeah. So another one. Since I started flying professionally, I was flying a Phenom 300 or 43,000, somewhere between St. George and Las Vegas. And, you know, it was kind of funny because the lady that we were flying in the back was a big ufologist.
Oh, really?
Yeah, which kind of cracked me up because, you know, there's not a lot of people that, like, you know, she had asked us, you know, on earlier flights or whatever, you know, a year before, if we'd ever seen anything weird. And I was like, well, got a lot of air traffic stories to tell you because, you know, if I pull them up, I can thumb through a bunch of them. But anyway, we're flying along and I see this bright light, like, you know, kind of like linear, like, I don't know, cruising across the sky, and it's moving fast, right? And it's coming from our right, moving to our left, and just booking. And I hit he's our chief pilot. He was flying with me, and I go, hey, what's that? and he looks and he goes, oh, wow. Oh, that's got to be a satellite. And I said, that's not a satellite. It's moving too fast to be a satellite. And it's I say way too bright, but, you know, anybody that's seen Starlink knows how bright, you know, satellite can be. So, but, you know, I was like, and it's flat. Like, it's long, skinny. And he was like, oh, yeah. I don't know. I don't know. And so anyway, we're watching it cruise, and I lean back and I tell our passenger, I said, hey, come up here. You want to see something that, you know, we don't know what it is? And she's all, yes. She comes booking it up.
There, I bet.
And and so as she gets up behind us, the thing passes, you know, our 12 o'clock, and it's moving more to our 11 o'clock, and it starts to get bigger and start to fade, right?
Bigger and fade?
Yeah. So it goes from being a really bright, long point to getting thicker and starting to fade. And so I mean, for me, right, I'm always trying to figure out what these things are, right? What's going on and what could that be? So I immediately get on the internet after it fades away, because it was about the size of a quarter in our windshield, maybe a 50-cent piece by the time it disappeared. So I get online and I'm like, it's got to be, like, we're either looking at a really cool airplane that, you know, launched out of Nellis, or, you know, a rocket.
Maybe a rocket launch.
Because a rocket launch would make sense, right? Any of them would make sense because, you know, you saw that long exhaust, you know, fire, flame, whatever, coming out the back. But as it moved away, I figured we were looking through exhaust plume.
Yeah. Or they do that separation and you get this big cloud that pops up sometimes.
Right. Yeah. So, you know, but anyway, I looked up, there was nothing reported, no commercial, no military. You know, there was one that had happened the day before, you know, out of Florida. So it was even the wrong direction from where this one was coming. But so I have no idea what that one was. But, you know, once again, it's more stuff that's ripping through our airspace that we have no idea what it is.
No. What was the reaction of the person from the back seat?
By the time she got up, it had already started fading. She's like, wait, what are we looking at that? And I was like, I wish you could have seen it was over here and it was moving really fast, because, I mean, we're at 43,000 and it was well above us.
Was it?
Yeah. So that one was pretty cool.
Wow.
You know, as far as like altitude and stuff, there was a couple of them that were really interesting to me, like kind of fascinating in that, I'll give you an example. We had a crew flying from Hawaii back to the mainland, and we had an aircraft that was reporting these objects that were, zooming, they're flying into formation, like into holding patterns, like, we do in the aircraft. And then they were darting out, and then they'd disappear for a while, and then come back and, join up and do a holding pattern. And so the controller that was working the sector started asking, hey, do you see this? Do you see this? And, all the other pilots were like, yeah, actually we see it. It'll light up and then disappear. And, some of them were bobbing, some of them were spinning, doing all kinds of stuff, right? So anyway, we asked this other pilot that's coming from Hawaii, and he's almost over Salt Lake at this point. And he said, we're like, hey, do you see that? And he goes, we've been watching them since Hawaii.
Yeah.
And, I'm just like doing quick, dumb math in my head. And I'm like, I'd have to break out ForeFlight and see how far it is to Hawaii. But in air traffic control, I always use these little rules of thumb, right? 10-degree turn in 60 miles was 10 miles, right?
Yep.
Then you can slice and dice that however you need for whatever operation you're doing, right? If you're trying to, you got traffic that's going to merge in 30 miles and you need, 4 more miles. Well, guess what? A 10-degree turn is going to give you 5 miles at 30 miles, so you're good. But anyway, if you back that up and go all the way out to Hawaii, and, these guys are staying there about 20 degrees off their horizon. So 20 degrees off the horizon, every 60 miles, that's 20 miles in the sky. Like, some of the stuff may be way, way up there that these guys are observing.
That's what it seems to be. We've received some cases from that corridor as well.
Yeah.
And just like you said, it seems like what one might imagine aircraft are doing, but they seem to be doing it in orbit.
Yeah.
Maneuvering like aircraft. It's been described as playful, almost like they're dogfighting in some circumstances. Other times, this figure 8 pattern or holding pattern or racetrack pattern we've seen. Man, I don't know. What do you think it is? Just to drop it on you, I guess, right?
Yeah. No, I'm kind of agnostic in this respect because I have no idea. A lot of it started happening about the time that they announced that we have a Space Force. So it's a lot of the stuff that, is that spike where we're seeing them almost nightly. Is that Space Force stuff? It might be. That's pretty crazy. But then I look at it too and I go, man, they flew the X-15 in, what was it, 68? I'd have to look it up.
That early, yeah.
But yeah, I think it was 68 at, Mach 8. So, it was a rocket plane, but still, Mach 8 that long ago. And I'm like,
Well, I'll tell you what, my thinking is that it's one thing to strap a bunch of explosives on the back of something and make it go fast.
Yeah.
To have something that can stay in orbit over an altitude, but maneuver as if it's an aircraft. For me, I don't have an easy explanation of how you could do that unless you're using an entirely new type of propulsion system.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it'd take a lot.
And it would require a lot of stored energy or ability to generate or extract or collect energy in real time because you're basically just constantly fighting gravity. You're just hovering, right?
Yeah.
And you don't really have anything to push against up there. Air's very thin, so none of the normal technique works. So how are you making these tight turns, right?
Oh yeah.
Well, you just don't get it. So.
Yeah, the atmosphere is, Yeah, you notice it when you climb 10,000 feet higher, how much thinner the atmosphere is in the plane. You can feel how it's, softer handling and everything else. I can't imagine, getting up into some of these altitudes and then, maneuvering.
Mm-hmm.
It's like
for extended periods of time too, right?
So, yeah. Oh yeah. From Hawaii all the way to Utah, that's a 5-hour flight.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, that's kind of, my fascination with it too, right? And I think everybody else is probably your entire audience is like, we now have enough sightings, everybody knows somebody, right, that's seen something crazy that's unexplainable, but we've got enough now that there's really no denying it for me.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, I'm kind of agnostic. I'm like, I don't know what it is. I think it's kind of ignorant to think that we're the only ones in the universe because the universe is vast and life seems, let's take a quote out of Jurassic Park, right? Life seems to find a way. But whether or not, it's them visiting us, it's, I have no idea. I don't even want to, well, I do want to guess at it. I play those mind games all the time, but But
Still not enough information.
yeah, there's just not. There's we know they're there, and that's the cool part, right? Because I mean, if we know what's possible, it's human nature to find out how.
Yeah.
And so I think we're in a weird time though. AI, right? Now you can you ever believe in other images that you see? Now that we got AI generating images like crazy, it's like it's just a weird time for this stuff. It's like we almost are moving beyond the best time that we had to really find out about this stuff. But we got better sensors, and I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see how it goes as we get moving to the future.
Yeah, we are in this interesting state right now. Just to zoom way out, I mean, we spent hundreds of thousands of years not really doing much. Living in the jungle, hunting, reproducing, and not too much more other than war. But as we evolved and as we saw a future where technology was increasing more rapidly, we kind of spoke in hushed whispers about black swan events and these rare things that could happen once, in 1,000 years. But with the acceleration of our technology, with the increase of capabilities that AI is going to provide, having new technologies, new capabilities, new business models that supersede the old ones, we're living through an age of black swan events, right? Just depends on where you're watching it from. And so I think, for some reason, society is probably best adjusted for having just one more black swan event with a further understanding of UAP than we might have ever been in the past. Things are accelerating. Change, I think, is going to be the only constant in the foreseeable future. And I think this is just going to be one other thing that we adapt to and change and move forward with a greater and more accurate understanding of reality.
Yeah. The other thing that I was thinking about is I actually just remembered as you're talking about this, some of the other reports that I got. I was sitting at the watch desk one night and this guy called, he's a pilot. He just landed at Provo Airport and he was in Spanish Fork sitting in his backyard. But as we talk about how things are changing, this one kind of, to me, represents kind of an interesting jump or whatever, right? Because he's sitting in his hot tub and he goes, look, man, he goes, I didn't even want to make this phone call, but I felt like I needed to because there was an object that came and hovered over top of us, and he said it was probably a mile wide, but he goes, it was translucent. He goes, I could see through it, but I could kind of see the edges of it. And he goes, it was silent. And he goes, I know this sounds totally crazy, but I promise you, I'm like not on anything. I just landed, I'm a professional pilot. And he goes, but this thing was hovering. And he said it took off and went out over the West Mountains. And, that's a big Utah Test and Training Range, right? It's a big military area. And then he said it like shot off crazy fast over there. And then came back with three of them, just whoo.
Two additional ones?
Two additional ones, yeah. And went over the East Mountains, all the way across the valley and over the East Mountains. And he was like, it was so bizarre.
And he saw this while he was flying. He saw these.
No, he saw it when he was sitting in the hot tub.
In the hot tub, wow.
Yeah, he just got home from flying.
Man.
But he was like, he goes, the only reason why I felt compelled to call is because I don't want to fly into one of these things, or I don't want one of them to fly into me, Wow.
I'm pretty optimistic about U.S. military capabilities, but whether we have bona fide cloaking with mile-long ships that can accelerate instantaneously, that would change my worldview of what we've potentially unlocked if that's something we have. I mean, that means a part of our society is basically living in a Star Trek future, and the rest of us are basically left to the side. Wow, that's how do you interpret that? And just so you know, none of that rings as totally insane to me because I've had very similar reports from pilots that have seen these things in the air as well. Sometimes over cities, sometimes, and not with this kind of opaque kind of perhaps optical signal management cloaking, if you will, but it's just seen it plain as day. Mile long, very large, almost aircraft carrier size objects over cities seen by 4, 5, 6 different air crew as they're transiting past a major area. And again, people always ask me, what do you think this is? And it's like, of course, some of this is probably going to be misidentification. Some of it certainly as our adversaries. But some of these cases, like the one you just described, it's very hard for me to imagine that's something that we put together.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's my favorite ones are the ones that, are unexplainable.
Mm-hmm.
We found out that the one was the space shuttle. We found out the other one was, a massive payload, experimental payload that got dropped. But the ones that are doing things that are beyond even our wildest dreams of capability, those really get my interest. And like I said, I don't know. I haven't given it a ton of thought as to what exactly is this, but I mean, I'm open to all kinds of ideas.
That's awesome.
I'm just trying to keep an open mind about it. But
that's all you can do.
like I said, agnostic at this point.
And, I would say you can maybe do one step further, which is exactly what you're doing right now, which is be an example to talk about this. And, I'm sure you're going to get back on the flight line. Well, you'll be around flight line a little bit, I suppose, right?
Oh, yeah.
Be able to talk to your colleagues and encourage them, hopefully, to report to us so that we can document this. And what's unique about, I think, the time now is that this data, these reports are actionable. It's not just something, like you said, people would go, okay, that's neat, and look away. There's real momentum, I think, into understanding this, which is going to push us further into, I think, the state we all want to be in, right? Where we just treat this like adults and really invest, as a society into understanding what this could be. And, I think that's just the struggle that we have as humanity, right? This isn't new in some sense, right? We've had these arguments with reality in the past and our position in it, right? When it comes to our, are we in the center of the universe? Were we created by God or evolution, right? We've run into these points where we've redefined our understanding of the universe just by looking at the data and information that we're already surrounded by.
Yeah.
And the only thing that changed was our understanding. And I think that's where we are now. Nothing's going to change when we acknowledge this. It's still the state we're in. It's just a matter of us acknowledging it and moving forward and incorporating it. So, and I think we've never been closer. So for me, this is a really, really exciting time. Maybe to close it out here, where are we today, from your perspective of a pilot? Are we moving forward to a state, that desired end state? Are we still hitting a ton of roadblocks? Where do you think the aviation community and the UAP conversation go for the next few years?
It's going to require reporting, right? It's going to require people not being shy about what they've seen, not being worried that people are going to think they're crazy or that, it's going to misreport, it's going to reflect poorly on their company, right? Because I think the people are, especially a lot of pilots, are still like super nervous about that.
Yep.
Like, boy, what is my company going to think? Are they going to think I'm crazy? Are they going to get rid of me because they think I'm unstable, right? But everybody knows that it's out there. We got to report. And, I think it's cool what you're doing with the...
Thank you.
Yeah. A place that is a safe place to report. We can de-identify, but we can still gather that information. And if we can get better at it and, like you said, move into maybe getting some of the raw radar returns from air traffic, because some of the stuff shows up on radar, some of it doesn't. It's weird how, you see some of the reports and you're like, wow, we got a target, we're actually tracking this thing. And then others, we never see it on radar, even with the proper filter set. And I think a lot of the new controllers, because now we have ADS-B, now we got 3 layers of radar. I think a lot of the controllers now, the new ones, aren't looking at their raw radar.
Yeah, they lost the touch.
Yeah, they're like, it's just kind of something that doesn't even cross their mind. Or they're working in the high altitude sector and they don't even realize that they have the capability to pull up that raw radar and look around when somebody reports something. But a lot of it might be filtered out because it's way too high as well. So who knows?
Fascinating. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, hey, thank you for doing this. I'd actually like to invite you one more thing. We're going to invite the members of our podcast to submit some questions to you, and I'd like to invite you to join us maybe for a small Ask Me Anything.
Oh, yeah.
After this airs, we can have our members come on and ask you some questions, and they'll probably have better questions than I will. Would you be willing to do that?
Yeah, that'd be fun.
That'd be awesome. Thank you. All right. Well, this was great.
All right.
Thank you so much.
You bet.
All right. Great. How was that?
It's fun.
Anything we want to cover that we haven't, perhaps?
I
We're on time.
Yeah. The only thing that I think that would be
Let's just let it record, actually.
Okay. I was gonna say the only thing that I think would be an interesting ad would be, when I told you about the Marfa lights, and
Oh, yeah.
if anybody wants their mind blown, go down to Texas, go visit Marfa, Texas, and go watch those lights. And I read all the reports about what they thought it was before I went there, and who knows, man? Like that's one of those things where you're like, okay, the first reports were in the 1800s. They thought it was, campfires out there or something. And then I think SMU did some research and they thought it was refraction from car lights on this highway that's like 100 miles further south. And I'm like, if the first reports from 1857, how are we doing car lights? How are we blaming on car lights now?
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's something that just was mind blowing to me. Like,
Say the name of the town again?
Marfa.
Marfa.
It's called Marfa lights.
I've heard that there's a few spots in the world where that's the case, where people can go out and see some of what might be similar phenomenon or perhaps partially the same phenomenon on a regular basis. And so you went out there, and I remember you telling me you talked to one of the locals that was there when you were there. And I guess you were there on a good night.
Yeah. I saw a ton of them, and I went in there with all these theories of what it was in my head. And, there's 6 lights over here that are popping up. They're floating up. They're merging. They're blinking out. They blink back on. And I was like, okay, if they're saying it's reflection off of, I don't know, some desert deflection of light from a highway, maybe, but they're not moving in succession. They're not moving in any predictable way. So I was like, And then lights popped up over here. I was like, this was against a dark mountain that, I'd seen that day. And I'm like, light popped up there, floated around a little bit, went out, another one further down. And I was blown away.
Wow.
But yeah, I talked to one of the people that were from the town, and, and he was like, yeah, it's a really good night. And he told me that they used to, before they have an observation, like, rest stop there.
Yeah.
And it's cool. It's set up, they got those, they don't work very well, but those big old binoculars you drop a coin into, and you can, they've got some of those there. But anyway, he said that before they had that, they used to go set up picnic tables, and these orbs of all different sizes would approach more.
Wow.
Like, they would come up, one lady told me, oh yeah, we used to sit on the picnic table and they'd like float around us and go back out in the desert. Like I said, you want to actually experience something that you cannot explain, go down there.
I wonder, when it's all said and done, how much of this, how these different phenomena are going to kind of categorize out at the end of the day, right?
Yeah.
I mean, seeing what presumably sounds like a cloaked large craft, right, is one category of phenomenon, but a repeatable, nebulous, maybe plasma, maybe ball lightning, maybe something else that repeats in a certain area for decades, if not longer. Maybe totally different type of phenomenon. Maybe they're both parts of the same, underlying, I'll just say conglomeration of matter, or maybe technology that is, relevant for propulsion on one end, or maybe is useful for, as a byproduct of some strange occurrence of electromagnetic fields in the earth that, somehow generate and keep coalesced plasma for some period of time. I don't know. And, does that same thing happen around the sun, or perhaps at higher altitudes? Does the Earth's magnetic field perhaps create some of this phenomena at altitude, and is that representative of what we're seeing? I don't know. It's very interesting.
Yeah, no, it was, like I said, it was fascinating. And for me, it kind of got me over that hurdle of, I don't understand it, so I'm not going to think about it. It was, okay, I don't understand it, but I'm very curious about it, right?
And it's in your face. It's
it's like you're sitting there watching it. I was almost embarrassed by the time I left, because I spent like 4 hours there, just like jaw dropped, just like, whoa, what is this? I could not make sense of it. And I think with a lot of the sightings people have, it's so much shorter time frame. Not always, but usually so much shorter time frame.
Yep. So to have something repeatable for a long period like that is definitely special. Awesome. Thank you.
Yep.